Today on Lather Talk, we'll be talking about shaving brushes. We'll share our shaving brush preferences and how we got there, as well as what type of brush knot is best for beginners. For this conversation, we're joined by our friend Ross, who is also a daily shaver from West Coast Shaving's YouTube channel. Stay tuned for the episode, coming right up. Hello and welcome to another episode of Lather Talk. This is John, and with me I have my co-host Gerard.
What's up, guys?
And we have our special guest and friend, Ross.
How's it going?
So one connection that the three of us have is we are all daily shavers on West Coast Shaving's YouTube channel. And in general, we're all enthusiasts of what shaving, have spoken to each other in various social media forums, Instagram, Facebook, and all that. So today, we just want to bring that conversation live to you and invite you guys to join. And the topic of the conversation today is actually brushes, shaving brushes in particular. And what we'd like to do is kind of share our journey starting out in wet shaving. What kind of brushes do we use? What have we explored? And even what our preferences are today. So Gerard, can I inconvenience you and ask you to start?
Sure. So I think my first brush, I think on the first episode I mentioned that I got like a small set on Amazon. And I think it was probably just like a pretty crappy Pure Badger off there. I don't even think at the time synthetics were a thing or they were like popular. And that's what I used for a good while. And then I don't even remember who got me into synthetics. It was probably Abraham, also from West Coast Shaving, and things like that. I kind of blame him for anything that, when I was introduced into the hobby in general. So I went synthetics just for a while because I wasn't really familiar with Badgers. I knew that they required a little bit more maintenance. They're a little bit pricier and whatnot. But I think in the past year, you've seen more and more companies just kind of putting out their own knots, Badger knots in particular, at reasonable prices, reasonable performance. And so I have a good healthy mix. It's probably 50-50 for me right now. I'm looking at my little pile over here, and it's probably a good maybe 50-50 split between some synthetic variants and Badgers.
Nice. I'm sorry, did you share what the total count is right now?
Oh, 16 brushes. Actually, yeah, 16 brushes. I think the split's I have 6 or 7 Badger, 1 horsehair, and we can talk about this later. And the rest are synthetics.
Nice.
It's good.
Awesome. And Ross, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your little brush journey.
So mine was actually very similar to Gerard's. I think in general, I kind of unknowingly fell into the hobby. I was actually gifted an Art of Shaving set, small set, and it actually came with one of their brushes, which was also a Pure Badger. It was by far the worst brush I think I've ever used to date. Even knowing what I know now, it just it had no density to it, just nothing. It was just rough, scritchy. But that's what it's started it. And once I kind of really started to explore the hobby a little bit more, my first brush was actually it was a Badger brush. I believe it had a 26 millimeter 2-band bulb, and it was in a Carnivus and Richardson handle, which it was made of stainless steel, so I think it was heavy. I was like, is this what all brushes are like? But so that's kind of what started it. It wasn't really anything special. I got it for a fairly cheap price, especially for what they've been going for in more recent years, although that has a lot to do with the fact that they've kind of been doing the collaboration with Declaration Grooming from time to time. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And, you know, I've pretty much stuck with badgers. I did have a small period where I kind of shifted gears towards synthetics, but ultimately I came back to badgers. Something about the aesthetics, sort of just knowing that there's a different variety of badger hairs and just kind of exploring what each one has to offer. It's kind of, I guess, kept me more intrigued, a little bit more engaged, if you will, in terms of brushes. And so yeah, that's pretty much how my journey started with brushes.
Awesome. I guess mine's a little different in that when I started out, I primarily used boar brushes. They were budget friendly, and I think a big part of it is how far synthetic and badger knots, the accessibility and the variety it was slim pickings back then. So, and I think I was influenced too by the main research and interaction I had with the wet shaving community was badger and blade. And over there, at the time at least, I think still now, they definitely prefer boar. So, I went with a Vanderhagen like this, just from the pharmacy. It's fun to break in. I used it, but then eventually upgraded to I think I had 2 or 3 Samog brushes that I liked, and I stuck with that for like about 2 years. And we discussed in a previous episode, me and Gerard, where I think we had a period where we locked in to the setup where it was like Parasso Cream. For me, it was my Mercure 34, and then one of the 3 boar brushes, and that was good. And I think I got used to the angle and the actual shaving part. And then I think when synthetics, I still remember tuxedo knots kind of really causing a stir in the wet shaving community. And I think that was my first synthetic, was trying tuxedo, trying a Poisson style one. And I still actually both really enjoy those, to the point where I kind of sold off said boar brushes, or I gave it to other friends that were getting into wet shaving. And then slowly the collection grew to the point, I don't know what the percentage is. I wish I double check that. It's bad that I don't know what the total count is. Let's say 25 there. And it is primarily maybe like a 60-40 split between badger and synthetic. And I have kept like 2 boar brushes just for the sake of, if I ever, I don't know, need to attack a really like a triple milled super hard, puck, and boar brush is great because that thing will just actually pick up the soap. But it's mostly for like nostalgia's sake that I kept them around. And that boar is like the Omega Pro like 89. It has a bunch of numbers, but it's one that a lot of people start out with. It's still one of my favorite boars in the end. And yeah, so that kind of sums up my journey with brushes.
It's a healthy collection.
It is. Try to keep the number under wraps. Actually, I think that's how me and Gerard connected a lot on when we were first talking. Right, we're like, hey, look what I got. Or I think we've both been testing knots from Omo via AliExpress. So it's been really helpful to get some recommendations from Gerard, kind of share findings, and even just really find out what are the differences in different price ranges. Like a lot of things, it's like bang for your buck that we'll talk about. And I think ultimately that's why people get steered certain ways. Like I'm curious, actually, what brush would you recommend if you were trying to get a friend or family member into wet shaving?
Well, if personally, I would certainly suggest synthetics to start. I think they're obviously, they require much less maintenance than your badgers, and they're obviously much more budget friendly. I think arguably that, especially when you're starting, those are probably the 2 biggest factors in terms of choosing a brush. I almost think it's a no-brainer. I think it is surprising though. I mean, there are some badgers, and obviously you all have mentioned Omo. There are some that are some of the badger knots that are starting to become much more budget friendly, and they're, it's that paradigm is kind of shifting a little bit. I wouldn't say completely. I don't know that anything will ultimately ever top the cost of synthetics. I mean, they're
Sure.
Some of them are under $10. You know, you can't beat it. But you know, the Badgers are certainly, you know, especially for beginners, they're not necessarily out of sight for starting. So it is kind of nice to see. It's nice to have that option now, whereas, you know, probably a couple of years ago, I would have just said synthetic and no questions asked.
How about you, Gerard?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like going with a synthetic. Like, you know, I know at least John and I are on Reddit quite a bit, and like I've told so many people, hey, because you could at least expect almost once a day on either Wicked Edge or wet shaving. You know, I'm trying to get into this. Like, what should I get? And I always like say this one is the West Coast Shaving. Shameless plug. West Coast Shaving, the 2-tone tall, and it's like on sale. It's like $16. It's a 26 millimeter with a nice boss knot. This thing's like fantastic, you know. And I'm like, $16. You can do a lot worse, you know. And there's a bunch of them out there. But yeah, I generally would like tell person getting into it, you know, either that or just get one of the starter packs or starter sets, you know, from anywhere, whether it's West Coast Shaving, Maggard, Sterling, any of them. You know, like you're gonna get decent quality for whatever your budget is.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys as far as suggesting synthetic. I'm just curious. I think there might be a small percentage that might still go with boar. Just, I think there's maybe the history of it, right? In the art of wet shaving, but I think I have a really soft spot for Razor Rock and some of the synthetic brushes that they offer. I think because they're one of the earlier vendors to do so. I think nowadays West Coast Shaving, Maggard razors, and even just like some I think like Barrister Man, right? Some artisans will just carry it because as a soap maker, it makes sense. The brush is vital. At least have something available so you can be a one-stop shop. So those Razor Rock ones, I think there's one that is a rubber set 400 style handle, albeit plastic, but it's nice, boss knot. And the other one that I like to use a lot is I forgot what the original. It's based on a vintage brush where the top half is black and the bottom half is like clear resin, and that has a Poisson style knot. It's like the BC Plassoff silver tip or something, but I still use that. You know, I still use that to this day. You know, even among expensive Badgers and whatnot.
That was my Razor Rock was my first synthetic. I had the Big Bruce. That was a pretty popular one, and that was a Poisson style knot. And it is definitely I think that one was probably about $10 if I remember. It was dirt cheap, and I mean, got the job done.
And that's the one that had like the ergonomic handle, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like a little curvy, kind of like the Simpson Eagle type of shape. Not
right.
Quite as extreme, but
it comes in the sides a little bit. But
yeah, exactly.
It's not very ornate, but it's like I think pure functionality, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I also had a Razor Rock. I think I had the Monster. It was a 28 millimeter. Handle was flat. I remember it was just kind of like flat and flared at the bottom, and then just kind of like almost like a bulb shape on top. And it also had like a Poisson style knot, soft knot. So, but yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to like definitely getting into it, you know, people don't necessarily think about you know, what quality like we're getting. So usually budget, I think you know, it's probably safe to say that budget is more important. You know, John, you were talking about bores. My brother was piffed. He was piffed a Samog. I don't know which it was, but it's the one with like it looks like a silver handle. It's like metal. I don't know if maybe a Samog Owners Club. I don't know. Okay. But I ended up borrowing that thing and using it. And yeah, that thing is great. But I mean, there is like kind of like the breaking in factor, a little bit of a learning curve, like when you have them and things like that. And I think, you know, hopefully that person that's purchasing it is aware that there is a little bit more of a learning curve with natural hair brushes as opposed to synthetic, where you can just literally grab and go. Like, you know, like you have to probably work hard to get a crappy lather with a synthetic, you know, from the get-go.
Yeah.
Right. Other than like setting the knot too high, too low, or something, I think it's foolproof, and that's why it's such a good beginners. I think it's also a really good travel option, right? Because the other thing with the natural hairbrush is, I mean, I always at least give a full 24 hours, right, to let that thing dry out before putting away to storage, because then you just risk mold, other funky stuff, mildew.
Yep.
You don't want that. So it's an excellent travel option. And so that's why I feel like everyone should have at least one in their den, whether you want to keep like a smaller size brush to go along with that travel theme. All right, guys, so we shared a little bit about our brush journey so far. I'm curious, since this kind of influences our preferences now, do you face lather, bowl lather, or both? Gerard.
I would say up until like 2 weeks ago, I was exclusively a face latherer, but I ended up picking up the Sterling silicone bowl, the one that doubles as that's originally like for a travel bowl for dogs, and things like that. Everyone, I mean, that's kind of the joke, but that thing really works. That thing's freaking awesome. And so I don't use it all. I you know, I'd say in the past 2 weeks, like my shaves have been probably like 50-50 as far as like using it, you know, to develop the lather. But I would predominantly say I'm like mostly a face latherer.
And how about you, Russ?
Yeah, same. I'm definitely primarily face lather. You know, obviously when it comes to like samples and things like that, I don't typically use samples too much, but of course, I mean, I have a bowl. I have a really nice bowl from Rebecca Graves, and so I'll use that. But primarily, I usually stick to face lathering. I feel like I get a better sense of like the hydration as I'm lathering up, as opposed to just, you know, adding water to a bowl and kind of gauging how it looks. I kind of go off face feel too, so that's kind of the biggest reason why I typically will just stick to face lathering.
I think same answer for me, primarily face lather, but I think in testing new to me soaps, I can really push, you know, the thirstiness of the soap, because on the face, right, like once you start like adding water to see where the breaking point is, man, it's just so much time to clean up. Like, it's lather is everywhere. It's in front of me, it's inside, to the back. You know, like, and I don't need that extra cleanup in addition to my gear. So the shave bowl is definitely something where you can see, you can see it happening. But I do agree with you that the face feel, I came to rely upon it, and I think in general that made me favor a pastier lather. Like, it's still obviously workable, but I found myself surprised. I think like Barrister Man Excelsior, even the new Holy Cow, dang it, Sierra, thank you,
yeah.
which we've touched upon before. That was the perfect way to kind of test that lather. And even then, like, I feel like I can still push it, depending, because I'm not super consistent about how long the load is. Like, I'll load for about a minute if I'm really paying attention, but you never know. So yeah, I'm trying to work in those bowl lathers more, especially if it's for review, testing purposes, etc. I think it gives another data point, right?
Yeah, I think what you had mentioned, like you kind of load for like 45 seconds, minute, or whatever. And like I've been just trying to kind of minimize the amount that I load. So like the past few videos, at least on the West Coast shaving videos, I've been just doing 50 swipes, 25 clockwise, 25 counterclockwise. And so far it's been enough, you know, like for me to get like decent lathers going. And so, and I just think, you know, I do think there's especially when you have like a lot of soap, you just want to like overload, like right over. I mean, yeah. and so yeah, getting those like really kind of pasty lathers, but I mean, like you can like with that, you can probably like get enough lather to lather your entire body, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a classic overloader. But for the most part, though, I think at least my approach is it's still, when I end up, the initial swipes, I typically will try to start out more on the dry side because, obviously you don't want to overhydrate off the bat because you have no chance of kind of building that solid lather. I always prefer to start out a little bit dry and then just add water as needed. But yeah, I'm pretty much a classic overloader. I think it's I've had this conversation with some people occasionally. It's almost I guess frowned upon if you have to go back to the puck. It's almost like, I don't know, just not a manly thing to do if you have to go back to the puck. So I think that's always kind of in the back of my mind subconsciously. So I'm just like, I better load enough and not have to worry about that.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week's episode. Join us next week where we'll be talking about luxury shaving brushes and specifically declaration grooming. You can find all the social media links for John, Gerard, and Ross in the description below or the show notes. We also want to invite you in on the conversation. Tell us about your shaving brush journey and what your preferences are in the comments below, or you can also email us at latherhog@gmail.com. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue the conversation on shaving brushes. Thanks and take care.